the ideas that we talked about today morning about self-esteem and self-concept. I was going back to talk about the relation between concept and esteem.
I'm not planning to. Do you have a question about it?
No. Same or
no, they're different. They're very different. The self-concept is who you think you are, and self-esteem is whether you like it or not. It's as simple as that. It's a different logical level. And logical levels is something that's been talked about for years in NLP, and often in a very confusing way, and in my view, often a way that's not very useful. But when you make a generalization or a categorization of something, you can then categorize that. Let me start. Let's say you go, this is a category that I'll call transportation. And in this category are things like boats and airplanes and trains and camels, whatever. These are all ways of transportation, right? Now, they're very different ways of transportation, but they all have in common that you can get from one place to another. Okay? This creates a category. Now, within the category boats, you have smaller categories. You get speedboats and sailboats and ocean liners and tour boats and, lots of different kind of boats, war boats, pleasure boats, etc. So these are subcategories of these. They're different kinds of, and each of those is composed of different things. And so this creates another logical level, because here's another category, and inside that there's another layer of categories. And if you call this layer of category logical level 1, then this category here is logical level 2, and then this is logical level 3, and then this transportation is logical level 4. Logical levels only have to do with relationships between categorizations. The classic logic thing of all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. And to diagram that, you have, here's a category of all things that are mortal. There's a category called men within that category. All men are mortal. All men are within this category of mortality. Socrates is one of the individuals inside this one. Therefore, Socrates is a man, therefore he's mortal. It's simple logical inclusion is called. Mathematics. It's logical inclusion. Now, in self-concept, you have this wealth of experience, all these different things that have ever happened to you, all the images, the sounds, the feelings of all the different things that have happened to you, including the things you thought about that could happen in the future, or fantasies, or books you've read. Those are all experiences, too. You select from those, you create a category we call self-concept, and a quality of self-concept, because we're just dealing with one quality at a time. And that is a category. It's a category composed of experiences that you drew from your wealth of memories. So it's a certain kind of category. Now, if you like it, you put it in the category of positive things in your life, and that gives you self-esteem. If you put it in the category of negative things, and that's a larger category, because a category of positive things can be pieces of self-concept, carpets, chairs, trips to Europe, anything can go into the category of positive or negative. It's a very large category, potentially. You could look at the world and go, everything is either positive or negative or somehow in between. But at least the category of positive things is something that is very, very large, potentially.
Can you say then self-concept enforces self-esteem, it empowers self-esteem,
Well, you could put it that way, but I prefer to just say that your self-concept is who you think you are, and self-esteem is whether you like it or not. If I'm clumsy and I don't like it, then I don't get to have self-esteem because my self-concept doesn't support it. Maybe I would say that. Your self-concept supports self-esteem or makes possible self-esteem. And of course, that's in relation to your values, as I mentioned earlier. So that's kind of circling back to the beginning of the day, and it's also doing something that Eric wanted to play with a little bit. Logical levels do not belong to content. They only belong to relationships between categories. If I just looked at this, I could say these are logical level 1 and this is logical level 2. If I go to subcategories, then this is logical 1, this is 2, this is 3. If I go to even smaller, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's a little bit like fatherhood. Like I am a father. I have a son. But my father who is my son's grandfather, is my father. He's my father, but he's my son's grandfather. It's a relationship. It's not like something that belongs to a particular element here. And of course, my great-grandfather is the father of this son, and so on. It's a relationship thing. And logical levels are like that. Dilts and a few other claim that logical levels belong to categories of experience, and they don't. They only belong to relationships between categories of experience. It's how you think. Logical levels don't exist in the world. They're only in terms of how we think about the world. But that is another seminar. Coming right up. Sign up now. No, it's something I've been working on for some years, recently with Charles Faulkner particularly. And there's still some work to be done. This is what we taught earlier in July here, the curriculum workshop that was described. And it's going into this in more detail. But as I say.
This category is family? What you are...
Well, you could call the whole thing descendants or relationships or paternity. I mean, you could call it anything you want. We just create categories and we put names on them. But the point I want to make is that fatherhood is in relation to whom? That in relation to my son, I'm his father. In relation to my father, I'm his son. Right? And et cetera, et cetera. And logical levels are like that. They don't belong to a specific piece of experience until you know how someone generalizes.
How does this relate to creating a database that's more functional?
Well, that's the thing. Okay, let's finish up here. I didn't quite do everything you wanted. In terms of this over here, if this is my whole category of whatever it is, let's say a database, and if I subcategorize this into this group of things, this group of things, and this group of things, it makes it easier for me to search through the database and find what I need to find. I forget what these were. Machines, being kind to people, animals, and machines. Yeah. Well, you can subdivide your database, and we do. And this is another way to organize it in sort of subcategories of your category. Now you can do the same with qualities. You could say that something like consideration might be composed of what? Kindness and helpfulness or something like that. And somebody else might do it a different way. They might say being helpful is being kind and considerate. In terms of people's criteria and the driving criteria behind, what they do. Some people it's status. Mine is usefulness. I like to be useful to people. So for me, usefulness is a higher order criteria. And then it includes a whole lot of other things. I can be useful to people by being helpful. I can be useful to people sometimes by insulting them, depending on who they are, or I can be useful in many, many ways. And so I have usefulness as a top category and then a whole lot of smaller categories. So it depends on how you organize your world. And, of course, that's what all of NLP is about is how do people organize their world? How do they think? What are their meta programs? What are the ways they take this great, huge thing that we got out there and divide it up into different things and think about it and respond to it and all the rest. Okay, I need to describe your homework assignment, which is in your notes. On my set of notes, it's called 6.2, Putting It into Practice. What I want you to do, and now with cheap cell phones, you can call anybody anywhere in the world. So you can't get out of this by saying, oh, I can't find anybody. Not for you? Oh, okay. Then you have to go after a secretary or somebody in the restaurant, somebody here. What I want you to do, and most people are quite willing to help out if you go to them with a request. So if you just start off by saying, you know, I'm in this seminar, and they've asked me to do this crazy thing, and I don't understand it very well. Would you be willing to help me for a few minutes? Most people will say yes. If they don't, then thank them for their contribution, their response, and then find somebody else. And then do what we've been doing today. Say, you know, gosh, I've been learning about this, and, you know, people describe themselves and think about themselves in terms of certain qualities. Like I think of myself as honest and dependable, and other people think of themselves as sociable or intelligent and so on. What's something you think about yourself? Would you be willing to explore this with me for just a little while? Oh, yeah, well, I think I'm intelligent or something, whatever they say. And then say, gosh, well, how do you know that, you know? Oh, and you watch their accessing cues and stuff, and whether they make pictures or they go down like this or whatever. And just ask the kind of questions we've been asking here. And I think it's pretty explicit in the little handout. And practice, what I want you to do is practice with someone who has not been through this day of madness. Because it is a little crazy. You know, if you just walk into a cowboy bar and you start talking NLP, you're likely to go out horizontally. Because that's a different world than the seminar room. It's not better or worse, it's just different. So you have to kind of mesh with that other person's world a little bit. So that's what I hope you will all take a few minutes to do tonight. Those of you who can reach friends by cell phone, just call up a friend or two and find someone who's willing to play with you for 5 minutes or so. And
the cell phone, we can't see their eyes, but
that's
pay
true.
attention.
You can hear their, and mostly they'll probably tell you in words too, but all the other nonverbals are, of course, helpful. And just, it's amazingly easy, really. You just walk up to somebody and just say, hey, how do you do this? Most people will cooperate. And I want you to find out that this exists in the world out there and not just in my hallucinated world in here. People really do have these things. I mean, you know that already, but still, I think it would be a nice thing to do. Any questions about the assignment? I think it's pretty explicit. Now, I have one thing I have a request of you. I'm on bended knee, except my knees don't work very well anymore. My youngest son is in a musical production Friday night at 6, and I've been thinking I would have to miss it. But I got an idea. If we could adjust our schedule by 2 half hours, I could leave at 4 o'clock on Friday and get down the hill and see my son's musical production, which I would really like to do. It's not a life or death thing by any means. But it seems to me there are 2 ways to do this. I hesitate to cut into our lunch hour because I think it's nice to have that hour and a half break. But if we were to meet at 8:30 tomorrow and the next day, that would make up an extra hour, and then we could leave at 4. I could leave at 4 on Friday. Or we could meet tomorrow a little extra in the morning and in the afternoon, and that would be another way to do it. And if either of those would work for you, and I mean every one of you, if anybody doesn't want to do this, it's okay with me, and I'll just miss it. But I'll be all right. What is it? Does anybody have a preference? That would be easiest for me. Is that okay? 8:30 both mornings? Well, thank you very. That would be wonderful for me. Is there anybody who objects? Because I want to make sure this is not railroading somebody. That's what they used to say. Great. We'll meet tomorrow and the next day at 8:30 then. And then I will zip away at 4 o'clock. Zip, zip, zip. Which means if you want to hug me goodbye or say anything to me, do it ahead of time before 4 o'clock. Because I'm going to be loaded in my car and I'm going down the hill in my 84 Volvo wagon. Okay, great. Now, last but not least, under the secret cover back there, I don't think you want to record this. This is not of interest to anybody else.